Parents, loved ones, ecclesiastical leaders are often asking us questions like, what can I do to help? In fact, a father approached us just the other day, and that was exactly what he said. He said, my son is struggling with this issue. What am I supposed to do? I'm feeling lost. And so we often are approached by a loved one, or we find out or catch someone, or something happens, whether it's an addiction, an eating disorder, a bout of depression, anxiety, whatever it is that our loved one is going through, there's that feeling of helplessness that hits us, and then we're searching for that way to help, for that way to connect. We often wonder why they're isolating and withdrawing from us, and why they won't come to us and connect and reach out for our help. And we feel that drive and desire oftentimes to be part of their process, to want to be there. Yet, if it's a child, they're often scared to come and talk to us. If it's a spouse, they're worried about our reaction oftentimes. And so, finding the core of what's going on is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to give you information that literally can change a relationship in a fairly short amount of time. Now, obviously it's up to an individual to allow that healing to take place. So if I'm working with someone who's an addict and they say, I don't want any help, leave me alone, period, it's going to take some time to open that door, and oftentimes it's up to them. Yet if we have that opportunity for communication, being educated in the core and the foundation of what it is that's driving that disconnect, and being able to provide the information and the tools to create the connect. That's what it's about. So today we're going to be talking about shame. Shame is the core and the fundamental foundation of why individuals withdraw, retreat, isolate themselves, lie, go into anger and other behaviors that keep the healing process from happening. So in one sense, I want to give you some tools today that will teach you how to become a facilitator of healing. My name's Rob. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with Yes Clinics. What qualifies me to share this information with you? And I would simply say, as I've spent thousands of hours with teens, their families, ecclesiastical leaders, in facilitating this communication and healing process, these are the things that I've learned that are the foundation and most fundamental to healing. Quickly, first, a story. We had a client using some of our online systems, and he had been through many programs, had been through our program a couple times, was finding a great amount of success in healing from specifically pornography addiction. And he came to us one day and he said, yes, something's missing. I seem to do really well for a while, and then when I have a relapse, I just crash. And as we talked to him, he started saying things like, I'm just so sick and tired of my behaviors. He would say things like, I'm my own biggest enemy, even to the point where he was talking about how much he hated himself. And that's kind of where it clicked years ago as we were working with this gentleman, in that what he was experiencing was deep amounts of shame. And shame was driving this addictive cycle. And he was feeling lost in finding resources to help him open up and be able to talk about and work through that shame. So the tools we're going to give you today will hopefully help with that process as you implement them. First thing I want to do is define really the underlying purpose of what this is about, which is becoming a healer, which is fundamentally different than becoming a fixer. It's the whole proverb of give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach him how to fish and he can eat for a lifetime. Becoming a healer is being in a position where someone will come to us and where they can literally be at a point where they can be taught how to fish. And when we're dealing with sobriety, oftentimes we want to do things when we see someone with an issue, and whether it's addiction and we're seeking for sobriety, or whether it's someone who's cutting or has an eating disorder, or they're experiencing a major depressive disorder, whatever it is, we have that tendency, because we love people so much, to want to fix a problem. Fixing doesn't work. It works for a moment, but it fades. And when we go into fix-it mode, we often distance ourselves from relationships. That's going to make a little bit more sense in a minute here. So this is about becoming a healer. The way we become a healer is first understanding kind of what the opposite of healing is. And the opposite of healing is shame. So what is shame? Shame has two parts. When I first started doing therapy, I would often describe shame as a one-dimensional element, which was that I'm not good enough feeling. That's often how we define shame. I'm not good enough, I stink, I'm a terrible person, what's wrong with me? As little kids would say after they've made a mistake, I'm just a bad kid. It's that emotion, and we all experience shame. Shame is a universal emotion. We don't like to talk about it. It kind of creates a shutdown oftentimes in communication and conversation because we all want to escape our shame as quickly as possible. It's one of the most difficult, triggering emotions that we deal with as human beings. We don't like to feel like we're not good enough. We want to be accepted and loved and validated. And this is what I call active shame. The active shame where we are hating on ourselves. What I learned is that shame spends as much, if not more, of its time in its passive form. So, active shame, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to be loved. I'm not worthy. Those types of comments. Passive shame is when we've had so much of the active shame and we don't know what else to do, and so we start to escape. So passive shame can lead to use. If it's like a drug, pornography, alcohol, heroin, it can shut our brain off to a point where we go into a use state because we're so tired of feeling that self-loathing. And the irony behind that is when someone uses, they cycle back into active shame eventually, and sometimes very quickly. And it becomes this very dangerous cycle. We often withdraw and isolate. Again, in this passive form, we're doing things to shut down this active state of shame because it hurts so much to feel this way about ourselves. We'll isolate, we sometimes blame and project. Projecting is if I'm having a bad day and I get angry at someone else, I'm projecting my bad day onto someone else because I could have a great day and I could also project very positive emotion. So I would say this is like a blaming type negative projection that we're talking about. I come home from work, I've had a bad day, I yell at my kids for a messy house, versus I put myself in check, I've had a good day, I come home from work, I rally around the kids, and we have a happy day. I'm projecting positivity versus negativity. But often with passive shame, we're projecting negativity. Sometimes anger. We minimize. Because if we minimize, if I'm addicted to something and I minimize the nature of that addiction, I'm kind of solving temporarily the issue of feeling so much shame that I've been feeling before. This is why we minimize, because we hurt when we have issues. We don't want to face up to them, because when we face up to them, we've generally modeled a pattern of shame in our lives regarding that. So we minimize, and we could add all sorts of acronyms to this, but these are kind of your basics. Active and passive shame. And they cycle back and forth, back and forth. And when someone's dealing with an issue, depression, which is ironic because oftentimes depression is something that we don't have a lot of direct control over because it's clinical by nature for some individuals, chemical. And so we beat ourselves up for being depressed, and the more we beat ourselves up, the more depressed we feel, and we stay in this cycle. One of the key elements of treating depression is accepting that being depressed is a part of human nature. No one made a rule that says you can't be depressed. Society and the cultural stigma sometimes makes those rules for us, but that's not truth. Truth is that we are imperfect and we experience depression as human beings. Some don't, but most of us go through some type of depression, and some individuals struggle with chronic depression. And so to be able to accept that that's what makes us human, that's what makes us beautiful, as much as we don't like it and we don't want that in our lives because it doesn't feel good, it's part of life. It's an unfortunate part, but it is. And so we cycle through these passive and active shame emotions. The antidote to shame is what we call guilt. Guilt and shame are very different. They are not the same thing. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Dr. Brené Brown has done research on these things. Shame is, I am a mistake. Two very, very different emotions. If I make mistakes, then what happens is we start asking questions like, now what? I made a mistake, now what? Well, I can hide and withdraw from that mistake, which puts me directly into a passive shame. But if I'm in a true guilt place, that level of guilt in me will say, now what? Well, I need to be accountable. Here's what happens, however, with accountability, and here's where we're really going to start incorporating some of these tools for you as loved ones, church leaders, parents, whoever you are. When someone comes to us in accountability, we have a tendency, because it's in our human nature, especially if we're in our own shame stuff. Like if my child comes to me and says, Dad, I'm really struggling with something. If my initial thought is, why am I not a better parent? What have I done wrong? Where can I do better? If I start going into that parent shame, I'm going to project that shame onto my child, and I have a tendency to do one of two things. I either want to fix it. Remember how we talked about what often go into fix-it mode? Or, whether it's intentional or unintentional, we often come across as condemning. Well, what are you thinking? Why don't you just do this differently? Why did you use again? Well, why don't you just go exercise more and hang out with people? Then you won't be as depressed. Well, why did you cut again? You've told me 100 times that you don't want to do it anymore, so why don't... And so, because of our own shame, we'll often project that kind of condemning or fix-it mentality. Haven't I locked up the internet? Maybe we just need to put better filters on there. I'm not saying we shouldn't have filters on our internet, yet if that's our solution to dealing with a pornography addiction, we're in fix-it mentality and we're not getting down to the core issue, which, coming back to that story with that man we talked about, his core issue was that he hated himself. He hated himself as a pornography addict. He felt hated by his culture. He felt hated by the system around him. He had developed a cycle of self-hate, moving into withdrawing and isolating, sometimes moving into guilt, really getting accountable, but when he was accountable to others around him, he would feel condemned or like he was supposed to fix it, and he'd go back into a shame cycle, and his use cycle of pornography continued and continued. The healing process truly starts to take effect when we're able to learn. And it's not possible to totally be out of shame. We experience it as human beings. It's part of human existence. But to learn to gently pull ourselves into a healthy guilt place. And that's where we as loved ones hold the most power. Is when someone comes to us in accountability, we express love. We express compassion. We express empathy. Because when someone's coming to us or has been caught, they're already their own biggest enemy. They're already their own biggest critic. They're feeling that shame inside of them. We have the power not to change someone else's behavior. I just don't have that much power. If I had that much power as a therapist, people would pay me millions of dollars to magically just change behavior. I can't do that. I help facilitate emotional progress in individuals and teach them how to move out of shame and how to take accountability in a loving and compassionate way for themselves, and to find that motivation, because love, compassion, and empathy are an antidote. They douse shame. So let me give you an example. If someone comes to me and says, yeah, I totally messed up this week, totally had a massive relapse. Let's say they've been working with me for 6 months in therapy. If I was to say, oh man, well, we got to do something about that. Or if I said, oh my gosh, you were doing so good, what happened? Boom, shut down. I have totally lost my ability to influence. Therapy session over at that point. because I've just confirmed the shame that they're already feeling. What I try to do, and what I'm recommending we do as family members, as loved ones, and this doesn't mean we're condoning their actions as okay. They already know their actions aren't okay. We know this as human beings. And if we as human beings are so emotionally numb that we are justifying negative behaviors, if I'm using heroin and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with this, they're not going to be in therapy in the first place. They're not going to be having a conversation with me in the first place unless they're just trying to, and oftentimes we will justify because it's another form of minimization. So just because someone justifies a little bit doesn't mean that they're in total denial. It just means they're trying to temper the depth of shame emotions they're feeling. And when we meet that with love and compassion and empathy, it provides a venue for them to become more accountable. We can't own it for them. They have to learn to own it for themselves. And this can be a frustrating process sometimes. This is what happens in the process of healing with individuals, is for them to go through enough pain, but to experience enough love, and for me to be there and for you to be there as a safe and healthy place, not condoning or accepting the mistake is okay, but to help them process through it. So when we do that with love, compassion, and empathy, we've opened the door for them to come back to us and to talk to us again, because they won't fear as much. They won't feel like they're being fixed. They won't feel like they're being condemned. So the example would be, someone comes in a pornography relapse. Wow, so how are you doing right now? Oh my gosh, I'm feeling like crap. I don't know what happened. I've been doing so good. Why did I do that? I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, man, that must be so hard for you right now. I am so sorry. I've felt similar emotions in my own life where I wish I hadn't done things that I've done. That must be really hard for you. What I've just done is I've empathized. I've been compassionate. I haven't said, oh, that's totally okay. You should keep relapsing. It feels great. Because it doesn't. They already know it doesn't. They're already kind of in this pain place. And so when I compassionately and empathetically respond to them, it douses the shame emotion and it provides a venue for healing. Then I can start asking questions like, well, what are you going to do? What have you done so far? Oh, I don't know. I'm just so lost right now. What do you think I should do, Rob? That gives me an opportunity to go into fix it, and I lose again. The minute I go into fix it mode, even if they've asked me to, I have lost the empathetic connection with them. Because the likelihood of them doing something I tell them to do is actually very low. It has to come from themselves. I have a joke with my clients, and I say I have a huge pile of suggestions still sitting in the middle of my floor. That's because every time I give a suggestion, it seems like it stays in the office. Whenever a client says, here's what I feel like I need to do. I need to go talk to so-and-so. You know what? That's a fantastic idea. I totally support you in that. Now let's process through how that's going to work. And so just being there as a sounding board for someone can be one of the most powerful things. And it's hard as parents because we're so emotionally invested. That love relationship is so deep that when we see a child, a loved one, a spouse, a member of our ecclesiastical congregation, whoever it is, when we see them struggling, we so desperately want to see them heal. We so desperately want to see them that we often fall into that pitfall of fix it or condemning. And oftentimes clients feel condemned. I'll have parents come in and they'll say, we're just so non-condemning with our child. And then the child will come and be like, oh my gosh, I feel so judged and condemned. And it's very subtle how they feel that way. And it comes with comments like, we're so disappointed in you. Haven't we taught you better than this? They already know that. They already know that there's disappointment. They already know that they've been taught better. That's not the issue. The issue is they're hurting inside because they've made a mistake and they need to get into a guilt place, because guilt equals progress. When we get into a state of progress, it's because we feel safe enough in that conversation to explore healthy healing. And sometimes it takes multiple empathetic transactions before someone is safe enough to explore healing. I have numerous stories where I'll be meeting with a client for even months, and then finally after months, they will fully disclose everything that's been going on. And when they fully disclose, they might come in, I'm struggling a little bit with pornography. Yet when it all comes out, this is how deep it is for me. I have never told anyone this before. Wow. That's just like their shame storm comes right up to the surface. That's what they've been hiding and isolating. I don't want to scare any of you that the issues are worse than they are with individuals. It's hard to know sometimes. But when someone's feeling safe, this is where progress really starts to happen. This is where I have the power and you have the power in facilitating a confident and healthy environment for loved ones, as therapists, clients, to really dig in with you, and it takes time. Sometimes I'll have clients come in and I call it killing them with love, with empathy. We really just are there for them. And sometimes within a couple of sessions, they'll just be unloading everything because for so long they've wanted to get it off their chests. Yet I'll sometimes talk with parents and they're like, I know they're holding stuff back from me. Had a situation once where a client was sexually active, and this happened multiple times with the clients I've worked with, so it's nothing personal from one individual. But multiple times I've had clients that are sexually active. The parents have said things along the lines of, oh, if they ever, I would kill them. I wouldn't be able to handle that. Well, the child knows that, so they're not going to disclose to the parent. And so the other question is do we really want to know what's really going on in their lives? Because if we don't, we kind of have to check our own shame. We have to ask ourselves, if I know what's really going on, am I going to imprison my child and never let them move again because I'm so scared that they're making mistakes? Or am I going to provide a safe enough environment for them to heal? That's one of the most challenging things we face as leaders, as parents, and sometimes even as therapists. Because we see someone participating in behavior that we know is destructive, and then we go right into that fix it or condemning mode. And so that's when we really have to check ourselves. One of the lessons I give is saving our tears for our spouses or for another loved one. So if a child comes to me and tells me something really difficult, I might want to just break down and cry because it's so hard to hear. But that's not what they need at that moment. They need us to say, thank you so much for coming to me. I am so grateful you trust me enough. I'm so glad we can talk about this. Let's figure out where to go. Versus, if someone got picked up from the police station, you get the call from the police station, you go there as a parent, you're like, what the heck were you thinking? I told you to not go hang out with those friends, you idiot. Done, we've lost. They have shut down, they will not open back up to us. But if I say, wow, this is going to be kind of tough. I'm really glad that I can be here for you. I want you to know that I'm going to be here as an ally to help you through this. What? Aren't you mad at me? Oh, why would I be mad at you? This is going to be tough for you. You're going to need me to help you through it. I'm here for you. So does that mean I don't have any consequences? Well, obviously you have some consequences, and I'm not sure what's going to happen at home. We're going to have to sit down with mom and talk about it, but let's not worry about that right now. Let's just help you get started in this process. That's a very empathetic response to a very critical situation. And I call these critical moments where we catch the child looking at pornography. We find out they've been drinking. We get the call from the other parent that they've, done something wrong at school with another kid or something's happened. These are the critical moments where when we respond with empathetic kindness, we become healers. We facilitate a platform for healing because that's what we need. That's what we need. We need others to be there for us as healers. As we model healing, we teach others how to heal within themselves. When we model compassion, we teach others how to be compassionate to themselves. And so that's the goal here, is for us to all kind of teach each other and to work through a cycle together. And I haven't talked about consequences, and that's not the point of this presentation. Consequences are often necessary. But here's my rule with consequences. Unless two kids are beating up each other, of course we're going to give a consequence. We're going to separate them. We don't, Consequences should come after the empathetic transaction. And oftentimes we should help our loved one participate in the consequence creation. For example, what do you think Dad and I should do? What do you think Mom and I should do? Should there be a consequence? Well, I'm already going to be in court, or, I'm already pretty much toasted with this, with my schooling. Yeah, maybe that's enough of a consequence. So maybe that's your consequence, and we can be here to help pull you out and help facilitate your progress. Whatever that is. Sometimes the child might be in such denial. That's another one here. There might be such denial that we might need to help prod them a little bit. Now, the older a child gets, once they're a senior in high school, consequences become pretty ineffective unless that consequence is, well, you can move out of the house if you're not willing to kind of live by the family rules. But if the family rules are condemning and fix-it based, that's not going to do any good anyway. So rules and consequences should always lead back to self-accountability, moving into a healthy guilt place, even if it's not easy at first. Thank you so much for taking your time to go through this video presentation with me. It's really humbling for me, and the reason why I got into this work in the first place was because of various times in my life where I was met with empathy and compassion in my own healing processes. I've also had times in my life where I felt condemned and a lot of fix-it. I think all of us can relate to that. We can relate to the times where we feel like we're most motivated to heal, and times where we've wanted to shut down and just hide from everything in life because it hurts so bad. That's why we're making these videos, is to provide resources for you. That's why I got into this profession in the first place. It's my heart going out to you, offering whatever we can as a resource, being here for you. Please call us anytime. We're welcome to do presentations at your school level, at an ecclesiastical level. We love the education process because the more that we can teach others how to become healers, we know that that's going to facilitate and really pay forward more people being able to do the same. So thank you very much.